Yo, what's up guys? Yeah, pokeaim here with a video talking about Gengar. I just wanted to give my thoughts on Cursed Body Gengar. I know a lot of people have been saying rest in peace Gengar ever since it was announced that it didn't have Levitate anymore. And I'm not here to necessarily say, okay, you're wrong, but I definitely disagree with the fact that Gengar is not a threat anymore because it doesn't have Levitate. And I'll talk about why. I'll also talk about how obviously losing Levitate does suck in some circumstances, but for the most part in 7th Gen I believe Gengar still is definitely OU material. Of course that only is determined by usage, so saying it's OU material doesn't really mean much, but let's talk a little bit about Gengar. And of course if you want to leave your thoughts you can leave them down below. The music playing is by Hoops and Hip Hop. The link to the song will be down below. It's a Cianwood remix. I really enjoy it. So anyway, Gengar, we all know it's a ghost and poison type. Since Generation 6, ghost type has received the buff that steel types no longer resist it, but they are neutral. So ghost is always... Ghost definitely already increased in power just based on that. Now, obviously in 6th Gen again, I'm going to be referring to 6th Gen and 7th Gen a lot when I'm talking about this because again it's just improv, it's me giving my thoughts and I want to talk about it. Having Levitate on Gengar was nice for switching in on Choice Scarf Landorus, locked into Earthquake, or if you were taunt Gengar, stopping a Whirlwind and Powdon, maybe taunt Wisping it, breaking it down with Hex and whatnot. And when Generation 7 came and it lost Cursed Body, its usage just plummeted. That has to do a little bit with the fact that, you know, it's a new toy syndrome. Everybody's like, oh my god, we have all this new, look at this like, this Nihilego, man, I'm gonna use this is better than this Mon, or, not even that, let's look at this Goliathopod, man, I'm gonna use this instead of using this Mon, which is fine, you know, everybody can use whatever they want. There's nothing wrong with that. I used all the new Pokemon, you should too. But, just because it lost Levitate doesn't mean, it has lost power. As I mentioned earlier, you miss out on the opportunity to switch into ground types. Now let's actually look at the relevant ground types of Generation 7 thus far. You have Excadrill, Garchomp, Landorus, Mamoswine, Zygarde, and Dugtrio. I'm going to go through every single one. Excadrill has Mold Breaker, so Levitate didn't matter. It can Earthquake you anyway. And if it was a Sand variant with Life Orb, yes, switching in on a predicted Earthquake could waste one turn of Sand, but Ironhead knocked out Gengar anyway, so that was always a 50-50 regardless. So I don't think Excadrill or Gengar was ever really a solid Excadrill switch in, even if it was on Sand. Maybe if your opponent didn't predict or didn't go for the Ironhead, then you saw that turn, like I said. But Excadrill is one of those mons you couldn't really switch into. Garchomp was not really a Pokemon that Gengar switched into. Yeah, it had a Stab Earthquake, but it also has this Stab Dragon, whether it be Dragon Tail forcing you out, offensive with Dragon Claw, or even having Outrage on Scarf variants. Gengar would never have been a switch-in, at least in this generation. Now Landorus is a little bit different of a story. With this generation came Z moves, obviously. So Fly Salamence, Dual Dance Landorus, and Pokemon like that became ridiculous threats. So Landorus was forced to run Hidden Power Ice once again, something that Landorus hasn't ran since 5th Gen, at least on a common Landorus. On the common Landorus in 5th Gen, you always see HP Ice on Scarf Landorus. Always. But in 6th Gen, HP Ice really fell because Knockoff got the boost and whatnot. But now on all Landorus, you're probably seeing HP Ice. Even on Scarf variants, this is probably the most common Scarf variant right here. And it's really unfortunate for, I would say, Gengar, because Gengar would be able to come in on 2 of these moves, even 3. Well, 3 of these moves if it still had Levitate, obviously. Hidden Power Ice, U-Turn, and Earthquake. Resisting 1, Hidden Power Ice doing nothing, and obviously being immune to Earthquake because of Levitate. But also in this generation, I did mention we have Z moves running around. We have the Fly EMZ, we have Rock EMZ. So switching in Gengar on Landorus has always, or at least in this generation, is always a risk. even if it does have HP Ice. Sorry, I don't know, it's not working. And I'm just trying to show you that even if Gengar did have Levitate, it would still be tough to switch into these 3 ground types right here. Especially if it was Rock Polish. Though I do want to note that Choice Scarf Gengar, which is a very solid set, can run Hidden Power Ice, which is really nice for Landorus and Garchomp. Mamoswine, though it is OU, it'll probably fall down to UU just by usage. It's another mon that Gengar wasn't really that good at switching into. If the Icicle Crash or Ice Shard or went for knockoff on the switching, Gengar died. And even then, the only way Gengar knocks out Mamoswine is with Focus Blast. So it's not really a mon that losing Levitate matters. Zygarde. This mon really came up this generation. Why? 1,000 arrows. 1,000 arrows. 1,000 arrows hits flyers, it hits Pokemon air balloons, it hits levitators, so it would never ever have been able to come in on this mon, even if it did have levitate. Duckshiro is a different story. Obviously we know Duckshiro got an increase in attack, and one of the common sets, at least for stall, is Focus Sash, Toxic, Reversal, and the last move is really what you make it. It could be Stone Edge, it could be Memento, though not necessarily on stall, but this is usually the set. And I guess on a set like this, having Levitate would be great because you wall 3 of the 4 moves. But Arena Trap obviously doesn't matter for Gengar, even if it doesn't have Levitate, because Ghost types can't be trapped. This isn't a Pokemon you'd stay in on anyway, and maybe Pursuit. So I don't think it really matters in the sense of Dugtrio. But obviously not being able to switch in on Earthquake sucks. I'm not going to lie. And then of course in a Powdon's case it could just Earthquake you. But that's just to name a few relevant ground types, and how having Levitate doesn't really affect most of them. If anything, it's always a mind game with Life Orb Drill, Life Orb Samrush Drill, and if it's Mold Breaker, obviously it didn't care about your Levitate, so it would break through you. However, that's not to say that Gengar is not a threat. I'm gonna put 4 Pokemon on the screen. In fact, they're all right here. That you definitely know how relevant they are in Sun and Moon OU, and everybody sees their secondary typing. Fairy, Gengar is Ghost Poison. My music stopped now. I got upset for a second. Gengar is Ghost Poison. All those mons get bopped by Sludge Wave. All the Tapus get bopped by Sludge Wave. Bulu goes down. Coco goes down. Feeney's 2-hit KO'd, Lele goes down. Now, because of that, Gengar's actually become very, very, very relevant as a choice scarfer in this generation, with the fact that it can outspeed Scarf Lele, it can outspeed Tapu Koko, it can pick them off, and nobody's really running Ghost Resist right now, outside of like Tyranitar, which of course will pursue Trap you anyway, but I'll talk about that a little bit later as we keep going. But just to say, Choice Scarf Gengar definitely is relevant right now, and not because of just the Tapus, not because of just Coco through Bulu, through Lele and all those, though of course as I mentioned, Scarf Gengar can revenge kill them all, 2-hit KO them, but also the fact that we've got other threats this generation. One of the bigger ones, Pheromosa, being bug and fighting. Gengar is immune to one and resists the other. The best thing that Pheromosa can do to Gengar is Ice Beam. Most of the time it's Ice Beam. Gengar still blocks Rapid Spin, obviously doesn't care about High Jump Kick. U-Turn does, a bit of damage, but Gengar resists. It really resists, and obviously you can't High Jump Kick it. And then Ice Beam. If it's Life Orb, it'll do, about half, which is big, definitely. But if it's like Choice Scarf, it'll stop it. And Gengar, again, can be used as a Choice Scarf user to be able to check those. And a bunch of other relevant threats. I did mention how Landorus Double Dance is getting popular, how Salamence is around, which is another reason why even versus Scarf Landorus, Gengar is still really good right now because it has that speed tier to be able to outspeed those mons. It's able to outspeed a +1 Salamence, hit with HP Ice, revenge kill it. And again, Shadow Ball, and even still having Trick in its arsenal to cripple Stall. Speaking of Stall, Cursed Body means that you are no longer levitating, and you are a poison type, meaning that Toxapex setting up Toxic Spikes. While you're not always going to come in on Toxapex because Skull can obviously burn you, Skull doesn't do that much to Gengar, and you can absorb toxic spikes for your team. And being a ghost type, of course, I already mentioned, you can't be trapped by Dugtrio. So this mon, while it may have lost Levitate, it now can function on offense as a poison absorber, which is really big for offense, because a lot of offensive teams in previous generations, they just crippled to hazards. They just fell over to hazards, especially toxic spikes. I think toxic spikes are one of the most scary. They're one of the scariest set of hazards, besides like maybe sticky web, for offense to fight, because offense is exactly what it is. It's offense, exactly that. It's offense. It's not meant to switch in on moves. And when you're taking this extra 12% per turn, if it's one layer, where you're taking 6, then 12, and it keeps going up, and keeps going up, keeps going up, it's hard to play, especially when you're facing a fatter team. But Gengar can obviously solve that, or at least check that, by absorbing the T-Spike. So I think that's really cool for Gengar this generation. Another thing I want to talk about is Cursed Body as its own ability. You might be saying, well, Cursed Body sucks as an ability. Being able to, a 30% chance to have my opponent's move disabled. This is very, very relevant for Scarfers, or at least when Gengar is facing Scarfers, because Gengar actually, though it is only a 30% chance, it's very, very, it happens. And I'll actually show you a replay right here from the Smogon Premier League that Cicada had versus Lycans, and we'll go over the team, or we'll go over a little bit. You guys can't see what pops up, but Greninja's at 29%, Tapu Koko is at 18.5%, Gengar's at 63%, and Landorus is, I believe, at near 100%. Now, Lycans actually has Choice Scarf Pheromosa, and it's not Choice Scarf Gengar, by the way. It's not Choice Scarf Gengar. So, at the looks of it, everything on his team is 2-hit KO'd or O-code by Scarf Pheromosa. And we'll actually see how the game goes, because the way Lycans actually played it, he weakened his team for Tapu Koko. So Tapu Koko comes in, which is fine. Sacks the Landorus, which is okay. Doesn't really help in beating Greninja. Pheromosa comes out. It is Choice Scarf. It's going to go for Ice Beam. Gengar's going to come in and Curse Body. So, it might have been Scarf Gengar, but Pheromosa's faster anyway. Curse Body. So what would have just been him clicking Ice Beam to win the game, stopped right there by Curse Body. It doesn't end there. And this is a very, very, very relevant turn, I guess, that goes by. This is something that happens when Gengar can switch in on Scarfers. Even when it goes down, obviously, it's Curse Body activating. So we'll keep going through the replay. So he's forced to switch, obviously, because he cannot knock him out. He could potentially struggle, I suppose. I might have actually knocked him out. And Cicada plays this very, very well. He's very aggressive, and he's actually taking advantage of the fact that he has Cursed Body. He's banking on it in order to win. You saw right there, he put a double out the top of Koko, predicting Tyranitar on the turn that Sam would end. Very solid play, because not only would Tapu Koko live to see the end of the turn, but it would also knock out Tyranitar because the Speed Death boost is there, and Lycans had no switch into that Thunderbolt. So Cicada right here makes his best play, which is going right to Gengar, and there you go. Gets the Cursed Body again on Scarf Pheromosa. So Landorus is able to come in and essentially get a kill, or U-turn out, playing very aggressively. Again, very good play on Cicada's part. Bring in his Tapu Koko, and just being able to click Thunderbolt right here. Very, very solid play on his part. And again, Cicada makes the smart play of actually going right out to Landorus, because had he U-turned out into Tapu Fini, he could have sacked Landorus to get off damage and got to Tapu Koko after, while at the same time also making it that he can't go for U-turn right here to win. So sacks the Landorus to Ice Beam. Greninja comes out, which is not in range of Ice Beam just yet. It is 2-hit KO'd, but it's not in range, and goes for U-turn very aggressively. And at the same time, he's still wasting the sun. It's still going to come down to luck here, but Thunderbolt does not knock out Tapu Fini, and Lycans could not really switch out into Pheromosa, because, well, actually it depended right here, because I think he could have potentially switched out to Pheromosa, sacked it, gotten up the Misty Terrain, but at the same time, Koko would have just U-turned out into Greninja most likely, and even then Fini might have been able to live the onslaught. But now Cicada goes for his best play, which is going for some high roll Water Shurikens, ends up getting it, becomes Battle Bond Greninja, and because of that, he is able to knock out the Pheromosa. And that just goes to show, it was still a little bit of luck, definitely, but this is a very, very real scenario that Curse Body does activate, especially versus Pheromosa, probably the most, because Gengar is the one coming in on Pheromosa the most. So Curse Body is definitely not a deadbeat ability. You've seen it work before on Frostlass, and Gengar in general, having Ghost Stab is just great, because like I said, a lot of people are not running Ghost Answers. Dark types like Tyranitar, Choice Scarf Tyranitar in last generation was probably one of the best checks to Gengar, or easily one of the best checks to Gengar. In this generation, with the speed creep, with Pokemon like Tapu Koko, Pokemon like Greninja being back, with Pokemon such as Dual Dance Landorus setting up if you are locked in, Choice Scarf Tyranitar is not relevant anymore as a threat. It still is used, but not to the point that it was before. Bandit is probably the most common Tyranitar, especially because Stall is so relevant right now. So Bandit is one of the most common variants of Tyranitar, and in this generation we do get Z moves. So Gengar can run pokeaimMD, Focus Blast. And I've always said this about Gengar and Alakazam. They would be so much better if they didn't have to rely on Focus Blast to kill the same Pokemon, Tyranitar and Heatran. Obviously, Gengar received the boost in the fact that Steel no longer resisted Ghosts, so you can Shadow Ball Heatran, but Tyranitar's not the case. And now it can go for all-out pummeling, Focus Blast, knock out Tyranitar, smack Heatran as well. I think that's another thing I just wanted to add. Like, Gengar is definitely still a relevant threat. I definitely didn't mention everything about it, but a lot of stuff I mentioned I think is very relevant to what we have, or what's going on, and it fits so well on all the teams running around. You can run Thunder on Rain teams, and it can still be your Toxapex absorber, because Rain teams don't like Toxapex. You can run Sub, you can run Will-O-Wisp Hex. Such a great Pokemon. Obviously, being resistant to Fairy is so cool. In a meta where Tapu Fini's running around, just clicking Nature's Madness, getting out that 50%. I definitely think this is one of those underlooked threats this generation. Now, I do want to know your thoughts. Again, you can leave them down below. I don't think it's fair to say Gengar is completely fallen because it doesn't have Levitate, so it can't switch it on Earthquake. Yeah, I talked about the relevant ground types in this generation. It's still, I mean, I guess it would still be a prediction, but like even versus like a Choice Scarf Landorus locked into maybe HP Ice at like 10, and my Gengar's at 10%, and then I have a 20% regular Garchomp in the back, and they have just Last Mon, Landorus, Therian. Well, I guess in that case they would Earthquake. Let's say my Garchomp is out of range of Earthquake, okay, but not HP Ice, or maybe that's not the scenario, but it's just a scenario like you can use Curse Body to mess around with Scarfers to just get them locked out or not have them use their attack. And I showed you in the SBL replay, but that's just something that's happened multiple times when I've used Gengar. And yeah, again, I do want to know your thoughts. You can leave them down below. I still think Gengar is definitely a relevant threat, especially with the Pokemon that are running around right now. And again, I already mentioned the Tapus, the Beasts, but more so the Tapus, and obviously like Pheromosa. But again, you can leave your thoughts. Let me know if you would like me to do this again. It's just me talking, obviously. It's a lot of improv. I might be talking about Talonflame next. So I do want to know your thoughts if you want me to do that. Feel free, of course, to leave a like, subscribe, do your thing, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye, friends.